Okay, I got another question from one of our listeners here. This is a good one. What's wrong with Christian Universalism? Ooh, yeah. Christian Universalism, really, really attractive way of thinking about Christianity, and I think we see it more and more kind of growing in popularity, but there is something wrong with it. So let's dig into that. So what's wrong with Christian Universalism? Well, we should probably define the term first. Christian Universalism is the belief that what Jesus did on the cross is ultimately going to be applied to everyone, and so everyone will be saved, regardless of whether or not they put their faith in Jesus before death. Now, there's a couple different versions of it. Some versions would say that maybe after death people would put their faith in Jesus, or maybe it's just that everyone's forgiven because of what Jesus did, regardless of whether or not they put their faith in Jesus. But that's the basic concept of Christian Universalism. Basically, everybody goes to heaven, regardless of whether or not they personally put their trust in Jesus. So what's wrong with that? Well, first off, can we just acknowledge that, I get it. I totally understand why that view would be attractive, because, if you have a loving God, it's hard to reconcile the idea that a loving God, a good and loving God, would consign anybody to eternal separation from Him, which is painful. And we use the word hell, and sometimes we think of hell as God punishing, almost like He's poking the people who didn't say yes to Jesus. But as I read the Bible, I see a lot of language that really suggests that hell is it's the deep and deep pain of eternal separation from a God that we rejected in life, okay? What that looks like we can talk about, but the point is it's a deep and abiding pain for all of eternity that's experienced because we're separated from the God that we rejected in life, okay? And it's just hard to understand how it is that a loving God could allow anybody to go into that, and so that's where you get the attraction of Christian Universalism. Here's the problem, I think, with Christian Universalism, in spite of the fact that I can totally understand why it's an attractive concept. First is that Jesus made it very, very clear that we needed to say yes to following Him. We needed to acknowledge Him publicly before others, and that if we didn't do that we weren't His. So Jesus made it very clear that had to happen in this life. He also made it very, very clear that there was an eternal, conscious separation from God that was agonizing. In fact, Jesus talked more about hell, honestly, than any other part of the Bible. We get more teaching on hell from Jesus than any other part of the Bible. And think about that for a second. We get more teaching on hell from Jesus, the most loving person ever, than anybody else. And so Jesus made it very clear this is a reality. And then I guess we probably also recognize, too, that the Bible consistently says over and over again that we have to make the decision whether or not we choose relationship with God through faith in Jesus in this life. The book of Hebrews says that it's appointed to human beings to die once, and after that to face judgment, and that judgment is a final judgment about our eternal destiny, not on the basis of how many good things we've done or how many bad things we've done or anything like that, but simply on the basis of whether or not we have that relationship with God through faith in Jesus. As hard as it is to think about the idea of a loving God allowing somebody to go into eternity separated from Him, we also have to remember that part of being a loving God is that He gives us reality. He gives us authenticity. He gives us the opportunity to be real creatures who actually have the ability to reject God. And sometimes we have this idea that maybe, if we didn't accept Jesus before we die, after we die, we'll suddenly go, oh, now I totally will. I'm totally willing to bow down now and accept Jesus as Lord of my life. But why would we think that we'd be different in death than we've been in life? And so I think a loving God actually is expressing love in allowing His real creatures to make real decisions and ultimately to have the consequences of those real decisions that they have made for themselves. Because you can't force relationship on somebody. If you're forcing a relationship on somebody, it just ain't love, right? It's not love. And so as hard as it is to think about eternal separation from God actually being rooted in and related to God's love and respect for us as authentic creatures, I really think that it is. So maybe a little interesting kind of add-on to that conversation about Christian Universalism, there's another view that you sometimes get within Christianity called annihilationism. And it's in some ways it's a subset of Universalism, but it's got a distinct differentness too. In annihilationism, the idea is that if people have not said yes to Jesus and been forgiven of their sins and brought into a relationship with God, that when they die and are judged, they are permanently destroyed. The judgment literally burns them up, and so there's no soul left. There's nothing left of them, so they're just gone, and therefore they don't experience eternal conscious agony because they're separated from God because of their choice to reject God. So again, like Christian Universalism, I can see the attraction to annihilationism, because if you've got a loving God, it seems more loving to destroy somebody who would otherwise be separated for all eternity than to allow them to go into that eternity. Again, the problem with it is it's just not what the Bible teaches. Jesus himself consistently taught that there is eternal conscious existence even apart from God, but because it's apart from God, it's painful. It's agonizing. So the Bible just doesn't seem to really leave a good loophole in that idea of eternal separation from God, either by universalism or annihilationism.